The Transformers video game franchise has always been a mixed bag. Most of my viewers have heard me incessantly say that each Transformers product is only as good as its sole proprietor allows it to be. The various lores and mythos have proven that they can be this holy land enriched in milk and honey, but when it's largely associated with a top-grossing trademark owner, reality sets in that it's nothing more than a dour land milked for its money. Essentially, what I mean is that the core fanbase knows that Transformers has limitless potential of being something great. We believe that the product can be nothing short of awesome if Hasbro puts it in the hands of someone who loves the source material. Someone who wants to bring on a new revelation that's never been thought of. In order to make a successful Transformers title, you have to find someone who's willing to go above and beyond. You see, the developers at High Moon Studios had a different approach when it comes to making a game based on an established intellectual property. In December of 2009, Activision announced that they would be releasing Transformers War for Cybertron on the PS3, 360, and PC. During the planning phase, the art and design team began doing intense research by watching the cartoons and reading the comics. In an interview, the leading game director Matt Teeger talked about how they wanted to come with a story that goes back to the G1 roots. That particular lore would be the basic touchstone foundation for the game. They would also draw inspiration from other popular sci-fi mediums such as Blade Runner and Tron. The studio brought the concept and idea to Hasbro for approval. It began with a sketch of Bumblebee. It was a design that drew inspiration from the Generation 1 era while adding modern nuances to give off a more realistic, mature vibe. The approval process proved to be nerve-wracking. Around this time, Hasbro were adamantly working on fleshing out a newer unified continuity for the Transformers lore moving forward. It was a huge departure from their previous forays in meta-continuity, which preserved the integrity of the old timelines as separate, coexistent universes within a single multiverse. This new particular universe would be the more streamlined version for a new fanbase. High Moon Studio presented the idea of setting the game on Cybertron during the Transformers Civil War between the Autobots and the Decepticons. Aaron Archer, senior design director for Hasbro, stated for the Cybertron-based setting, and I quote, "It was really a cool place, and the early days of the Civil War between the Autobots and the Decepticons was a story that hadn't really been fleshed out in any format." He went on saying that the game would be only part of a bigger group of media. "This won't be the only touch point. It's a big place that we're going to build off of." And thus, War for Cybertron officially became the foundation of the new aligned Transformers continuity. Gaining Hasbro's stamp of approval boosted the developers' imagination through the roof, allowing them to treat a licensed property like a brand new IP. Unlike other TF titles that are usually tied to shows and movies, War for Cybertron allowed High Moon to create a canon for what the Transformers were going forward. Although they used G1 as the foundation, they made it a point to revamp the perception of the franchise. What Matt Teeger and his team did differently than other developers working on a game based on an established IP was focus on making great gameplay, actually tweaking the controls to perfection to make any gamer who's a fan of third-person shooters feel comfortable. High Moon made it their mission to avoid throwing the player experience under the bus for the sake of fan service. All of these minute details would be the base of the cake, while the mythos and references would be the frosted layer on top. Each of the characters were totally redesigned for the game, taking cues from previous iterations from the Transformers lore. Vehicle modes for car-based characters initially consisted of wheels, however, the developers found that it crippled the gameplay. Although it sounded good on paper, removing the player's ability to strafe from side to side would ruin the third-person shooting experience. After consulting the issue with Hasbro, the two companies agreed that the characters would turn their wheels down and hover while in vehicle mode, allowing for more movement. The vehicles would then revert to the traditional wheel mode while using a character's boost, maintaining what the Transformers license had established with the previous canon. The world of Cybertron was designed in such a way that the Transformers would have a proper scale in their home world. "It doesn't make sense that things would be smaller than them in their world," said Matt Teeger, adding, and I quote, "The key character in scale was making their world gigantic and huge. And they managed to do that and then some. One would think you could only do so much to make a planet smothered in metallic matter feel lively." For the most part, the developers made sure that Cybertron kept that dark and cold atmosphere, but deep within the confines of that drab, inorganic looking exterior lived a beating core that gave War for Cybertron the spark of genius it needed. Unlike previous Transformers video games, which featured distinctly separate campaigns for the Autobots and the Decepticons, War for Cybertron featured a single linear storyline. The Decepticon campaign occurred chronologically before the Autobot campaign, but fans could play through them whichever way they wanted. Certain characters felt weighty while others felt graceful, adding a level of distinctiveness to the gameplay. The weapon system demanded to be utilized in the wide open frantic levels. Each Transformer had the ability to transform from their robot mode to their alt mode, such as a tank or jet. Transforming in and out of your alt mode would seem like nothing more than a mere gimmick, but it was a requirement to gain more effectiveness. It elevated the game from being an already well-designed shooter into something completely different, a shooter hybrid. Each level presented varying opportunities for traversal, all the while adding the potential consequences of your decisions. Choosing to simply take a horde of enemies of aerial bots while in robot mode could ultimately get you fragged, and trying to simply cruise through each level without the use of accessories would be suicidal. Although the core mechanics were definitely well executed, like jumping around the environments and swinging your sights to fast approaching enemies, there were enough small issues that would continually get in the way of the action. As mentioned earlier, War for Cybertron featured a lot of wide open levels, but during downtime where chaos starts to build up, you're thrusted into small corridors. For instance, the cramped level design and quantity of enemy fire forced you to take cover often, making the game play like a cover-based shooter. However, you cannot actually snap behind objects, which makes it easy for your body to be exposed when you thought you were safely hidden. These small problems become a serious thorn in your side because the repetitive campaign does little to distract you from them. There were only a handful of different enemies to battle with, and other than a shielded bot that needed to be shot in the back, none of them required a tactically different approach. The bulk of War for Cybertron entailed shooting down AI deficient foes in similar looking areas, making it difficult for the player to distinguish one section from the other. Unfortunately, it only gets worse from there. During one excruciatingly long escort mission, you must defend Ratchet from a swarm of snipers, jets, and other robots, but the computers unfairly focus on eliminating you rather than your AI-controlled allies. Coupled with the painfully long time it takes to resurrect Ratchet when he dies makes this drag on long after the fun has run out. In another laughable scene, you're taken prisoner and stripped of your weapons. Every weapon, that is, except for the battle axe you carry with you at all times. Any tension was eliminated when you bashed through the prison wall with your melee attack and found a cache of guns waiting for you on the other side. The campaign can be played in single player or cooperatively via online multiplayer, and players can enter or leave the game at any time. If fewer than 3 players were present, the game's AI controlled the remaining playable characters. Thankfully, there was more to War for Cybertron than its less than stellar campaign. It offered several multiplayer modes to choose from like Death Mode, Deathmatch, and many others. Escalation was an additional way to play cooperatively, and though it shared a commonality with Gears of War 2's famed Horde mode, it was distinct enough to give even locust blasting aficionados something new to tool around with. The most noteworthy twist to this tried and true formula is the currency you earn for blasting down foes. Waves of enemy robots mercilessly hunt you and your friends, but you can buy upgrades between and during rounds to ensure your survival. Unlike the campaign, competitive multiplayer games didn't allow players to control official name characters and instead must design their own transformer. But similar to the campaign, however, generic multiplayer characters are split into 4 classes. Each character features some amount of customization. Players could select a base model and vehicle form, then alter major colors for their character and modify weapon loadouts and abilities based on the character's class. All of these additions proved to be a lifesaver for War for Cybertron, but the real rockstar was the audio. What High Moon Studios managed to do was nothing short of a masterpiece. Instead of choosing to acquire the rights to pre-existing sound effects libraries, they decided to create a new palette from the ground up. Sound engineers Rob Bourne and Ian Mika would go out of their way to record sounds from inanimate metal objects, further manipulating them with synthesizers. What Transformers fans got was music to their ears. Each sound effect bared their own uniqueness, ranging from a sporadic electric guitar riffs to bombastic metal pops. War for Cybertron's epic tale was further wrapped up in exquisite production values by music composer Tyler Bates, who creates a soundtrack that aimlessly insinuates Steve Jablonsky's score from the live-action Transformers movies. Peter Cullen would reprise his role as Optimus Prime, delivering those epic expository narrations that we can't go without hearing at the beginning and end of each Spay film. Other voice actors include Liam O'Brien as Air Raid, Johnny Young Bosch as Bumblebee, Fred Tatasciore as Megatron, Nolan North as Brawl, and Sam Riegel as Starscream. Every voice actor gave a solid performance. I can honestly admit that there were times where I would want to stop to soak in all the back and forth dialogue and references.
Ba weep, Grogna weep, Ninny Bomb. What was that? That's the universal greeting. I don't think it worked.
After the development was finished, War for Cybertron was released in North America on June 22, 2010, with the PAL region releasing 3 days later. The game garnered a generally positive reception, with many reviewers championing it as one of the best Transformers games ever made. It received equal praise on every platform, including the PC versions, and went on to sell over 300,000 copies worldwide. That may not have seemed like a big sales figure to boast about, but it was a huge deal for a game based on a somewhat niche property. The bigwigs at Hasbro and Activision were very pleased with the reception and immediately went into plans for a sequel. Hasbro representative Mark Belcher stated, and I quote, "This is the most highly rated critical success of any game that's had the Hasbro brand yet, and we're looking forward to a sequel in 2012. Now, before I go into details of that particular title's development phase, I feel it's only mandatory that I briefly mention the Transformers Dark of the Moon video game, because this project will tie directly into War for Cybertron Games later on in the video. Following the announcement of the Transformers Dark of the Moon movie, Hasbro hired High Moon Studios to develop the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions for a game. Dark of the Moon the game was a prime example of having a product that's being produced by not one, but two money-grubbing entities. As mentioned earlier, Hasbro is a company that's always strived for profit, but their intentions for the most part are good. But they're occasionally guilty of putting their products in the hands of someone with a dubious legacy, case in point Activision, a company that's known for their greedy antics in releasing unfinished games. High Moon Studios will get their first taste of how negligent Activision can be. In typical fashion, Dark of the Moon fell victim to what ultimately happens to a lot of movie-based tie-in games: rushed development. Now, I'm pretty sure that Activision opted to use a fraction of High Moon's staff, considering the title was being directed by Sean Miller instead of Mac Teeger. The game's main selling point was the newly introduced Stealth Force mode, which was a new ability the Autobots garnered in the third movie. This feature couldn't have been added at a better time because it was very similar to War for Cybertron's gameplay mechanics. Characters would be able to partially transform from their vehicle mode, allowing weapons to be used while strafing from side to side. Unlike most movie-based titles, the studio decided to make the story a prologue to the events leading up to the film. This was an excellent decision because it gave the players an opportunity to see why characters were in specific situations before they saw the movie. Hasbro also allowed High Moon to use some of the original characters who didn't make the cut in the Transformers Bayverse, like Warpath.
I've been waiting for my shot at you. Promise you won't go down too easy.
The campaign was spread across 7 chapters, each one focusing on a different Transformer, or in one case 2 Transformers. When in robot form, you had a few different weapons and abilities available, and the unique abilities of each Transformer lended the action a bit of variety from chapter to chapter. Mirage, for instance, had a cloaking ability and a sniper rifle, and Megatron could drain health from nearby Autobots. The biggest crown jewel of Dark of the Moon were the boss battles. The High Moon team understood what a boss battle promised in concept and delivered on it. If there's something other developers should take notes on, it was that. But as standout as the story of boss battles were, they unfortunately managed to highlight the core gameplay was desperately wanting of invigoration. You'd spend most of your time walking around or rolling your way through levels, pausing frequently to blast generic robots of the opposing faction. On very rare occasions, you'd need to do things a bit differently, such as in one section as Mirage, during which you only have the cloaking ability and melee attacks at your disposal. But for the most part, there's nothing that makes one battle significantly different from the next. You would fight the same standard enemies in similar environments over and over. What hurt this game the most was the developers' decision to use the Unreal Engine 3 in a similar manner they did with War for Cybertron. The giant expansive journey through the metallic world of Cybertron is replaced by the small levels whose playtime is artificially expanded by the quote-unquote survive multiple waves of bad guys in a locked room motif. Some of the levels showcased interesting ideas, and certain outdoor levels showed off some of the really fantastic lighting and color, but moments of inspired design were few in number. Even the parts that involved travel over large areas were surrounded by cliff faces or giant concrete walls. The game was riddled with poor textures that popped in as if they were still being rendered. The bump detection in certain levels were unfinished, causing your vehicle to be thrown off course during high-speed moments. And there are consistent load times that break the flow of the gameplay. To make a long story short, Dark of the Moon was the best Transformers movie game, but it unfortunately became another casualty in the movie game war of short deadlines. The ideas for something great were certainly there because the fundamentals were pulled from a great game, but Transformers Dark of the Moon stretched what High Moon Studios had time to build across too much game, leading to a dull, frustrating endeavor that felt even longer than it was. During an investor conference in November 2010, Hasbro confirmed that a sequel to Transformers War for Cybertron was in development. Transformers Fall of Cybertron was officially announced on October 6, 2011 in an article posted on the gaming magazine website Game Informer. In the article, Game Informer noted that their November issue would contain an exclusive feature on the upcoming game and the cover would include concept art. Henry Gilbert of GamesRadar wrote that he was pleased to see an original game being developed and said, and I quote, "Even though we like the live-action film's tie-in game, we're glad developer High Moon Studios is back to do what they do best, crafting new and old adventures for the Autobots and Decepticons." Once again, the game will be powered by Epic Games' Unreal Engine 3, but also utilize the Havoc physics engine. The development team went back to the lab creating newer concepts to further expand what they'd previously done. Matt Teagle would make his return as lead director and would go back to Hasbro with a list of big ideas. And what better way to go big than pitching an idea to reintroduce the Dinobots? During an interview given by Game Informer's YouTube channel, Teagle mentioned that Hasbro was very reluctant about his pitch. Since the Dinobots were characters who are always featured in post-Cybertronian war arcs, it conflicted with the new continuity Hasbro was trying to establish. But Teagle came prepared with a list of ideas on how the Lightning Strike Coalition could fit within their new timeline. Instead of sticking close to their G1 roots, the Dinobots would already exist during the war and gain their powers from Shockwave's experiments. All the key personality traits would stay true to their original counterparts while adding a pinch of ferocity. They would then go into the concept designing process. Characters from the previous installment would feature updated appearances and transformation schemes, or moving parts that animate regardless of a player action, similar to breathing. Optimus Prime was one of the chosen candidates who would receive cosmetic changes. Lead artist Ivan Power stated that the redesign from his War for Cybertron incarnation was to give Optimus a more warrior-type feel with more bulk added to his body mass. On December 10, 2011, the first official cinematic trailer for War for Cybertron was shown at the 2011 Spike TV Video Game Awards and featured the song Humbling River by Pucifer. It got an enormous reaction from the crowd and people watching from their homes. The trailer displays this somber yet chaotic depiction of the Cybertron War, giving an up-close and personal view of the Autobots as they go on an all-out tug-of-war for refuge with the Decepticons. With the help of cinematic director Dave Cravens, they were able to showcase the characters as they'd never been seen before. Unlike their last endeavor that mainly targeted the core fan base, this trailer would get newer fans aboard as well. Cravens stated, and I quote, "For the announcement trailer, we really wanted fans and non-fans alike to look at the Transformers as they'd never seen them before. If you grew up with the property as a kid, we wanted to do something that made you look twice." Mac Teagle noted that although the Transformers were metallic beings, he wanted the viewer to feel the pain the characters were going through. That level of detail was displayed brilliantly through Optimus Prime's emoteless yet stoic expression as he looked at his fallen cadet Bumblebee. The studio linked up with the visual effects company Digital Domain for the CG and motion capture. A second cinematic trailer dubbed Our World was released in March of 2012. Later that August, gameplay was shown during the 2012 BotCon convention in Dallas, Texas. Matt Teagle and other representatives took center stage to answer questions regarding the highly anticipated title. Peter Cullen would make a special guest appearance on the panel to share his enthusiasm for reprising his role as Optimus Prime. Fans got a hands-on experience of the game, and the reception exceeded High Moon's expectations. A toy line based on the game was also revealed. It would be manufactured by Hasbro under the Transformers Generation banner. It was announced that the toys will be released on August 21st, 2012 in North America, a week earlier than originally planned. Bruticus, a character formed by combining 5 Decepticons, was part of the line. Other figures included Optimus Prime, Jazz, and Shockwave. Like its predecessor, Transformers Fall of Cybertron would be an over-the-shoulder third-person experience. Instead of sticking with the formula that garnered War for Cybertron praise, the developers sought out to give the players more variety. Although the first game featured a robust roster, there wasn't a distinctive difference in the way the characters controlled other than their vehicle forms. This time around, High Moon focused on creating a wider palette of gameplay to play around with. Almost every character has been given their own unique ability. Characters like Jazz could fire a grappling hook to reach high or distant places, and Optimus Prime could command the massive Metroplex. Instead of being able to choose which faction you wanted to progress through the story with, the campaign would focus on tightly structured set pieces to keep an immersive flow. Every aspect of the game was pushed to be super tight, clean, and incredibly well balanced, said Matt Teagle. Transforming would play as a viable strategy as the player traversed through all the newer environments. Each level was themed around a particular character or sometimes pair of characters, usually offering a slightly different challenge to reflect their distinctive power. So Cliffjumper gets a stealth level for his invisibility, Jazz got a series of high platforms to use his grappling hook on, and Soundwave could eject his chest-stored Minibot minions into the fray.
Get ready to crumble before rumble!
Larger levels fared better, encouraging you to morph back and forth from bot to vehicle mode. Others would send the player on power trips, like allowing them to control the vastly powerful combiner Bruticus. Whereas in the previous game, characters had 2 abilities that were charged up by shooting opponents. Each character now has dash and a unique ability that works on a time recharge. Dinobots like Grimlock will control completely different from your standard characters. Carrying only a sword and shield, Grimlock cannot transform at will, instead accumulating rage as he battles opponents. When he gains enough rage, Grimlock was able to transform and inflict massive damage. Although these were all well-warranted add-ons to the campaign, Fall of Cybertron didn't allow players to invite a buddy along for the ride, unlike in War for Cybertron, which was a disappointing loss. However, the cooperative escalation mode was back and was an enjoyable take on the horde mode formula so common in modern shooters. Up to 4 players faced off against increasingly difficult waves. Once the players finished wave 15, the game ended and the players were scored on how many kills, deaths, and energon chips they collected throughout the match. As gameplay progresses, new sections of the level open, which gave players access to upgraded weapons and abilities, while players could customize one of 4 character classes. Autobot and Decepticon transformers could be customized with parts earned through a ranking system or purchased through the game's marketplace. Once again, High Moon Studios outdid themselves on the audio side of things. Veteran Transformers voice actors Peter Cullen and Fred Tatasciore reprised their respective roles of Optimus Prime and Megatron. Tatasciore also voiced Ratchet in the city-sized Transformer Metroplex. For the first time in 25 years, Greg Berger would reprise his role as Grimlock. Other cast members included Troy Baker as Jazz, Jetfire, and Kickback, Nolan North as Clipjumper, Steve Bloom as Shockwave, Swindle, and Sharpshot, and Sam Riegel reprises his role as the treacherous Starscream. Fall of Cybertron featured the classic 80s hit Touch, which was originally featured in the 1986 film The Transformers the Movie. After the wake of its release on August 21, 2012, Fall of Cybertron received generally favorable reviews. Critics praised the title for staying true to the Transformers franchise and providing good fan service, but some thought the story took too much time to breathe, causing the pacing to be slow at times. Although the gameplay got mostly positive receptions, reviewers felt replayability took a hit thanks to the absence of the campaign co-op. Graphics and audio also received broadly positive reviews, though some reviewers noticed frame rate issues with the PlayStation 3 version. According to the MPD Group, the game sold well during the month of its release, placing 7th in sales despite only being available during the last 10 days. It sold over 105,000 copies during its North America debut, according to Game Informer. Riding high off the success of Transformers Fall of Cybertron, Activision hired High Moon Studios to make a Deadpool video game. Returning to the directorial chair would be Sean Miller, who previously worked on the critically panned Transformers Dark of the Moon game. It was created using Epic Games' Unreal Engine 3 technology, which also powered High Moon's previous work, Transformers Fall of Cybertron.
Now let's roll out!
Wrong franchise, buddy.
Former Deadpool comic writer Daniel Way created the game's plot, and Nolan North voiced the character. Deadpool's game received mixed reviews, praising plot elements while finding gameplay itself lacking. The visuals looked dated and cheap even with a hefty budget and a large team working on it. The game's budget was $100 million, making it one of the most expensive video games developed, but it would go down in history as one of the most expensive failures. Following the negative response for Deadpool, Activision fired 40 full-time employees from High Moon Studios that worked on the project. They released this statement, and I quote, "Activision Publishing consistently works to align its costs with its revenues. This is an ongoing process. With the completion of development on Deadpool, we are taking a reduction in staff at High Moon Studios to better align our development talent against our slate. That would be the last time fans would experience a Transformers game developed by High Moon Studios." Shortly after Paramount announced that Transformers Age of Extinction was on its way to theaters, Hasbro and Activision were hot on its heels with a video game tie-in to cash in on the hype. It would be set before the events of the film and between Transformers War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron. This would make it the 3rd installment in the War for Cybertron series and the 4th installment in the movie game series. Unlike Fall of Cybertron and War for Cybertron, which were developed by High Moon Studios, primary development for Rise of the Darkspark would be handled by Edge of Reality. They were an independent company based in Austin, Texas that worked on video game ports for the Nintendo 64, GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox game consoles. Following the stability provided by the success of their porting venture, the company branched out into developing its own original games on multiple platforms. Similar to High Moon, the studio would use the Unreal Engine 3 and utilize the Havoc physics engine to power the Rise of the Darkspark video game. Not only did Edge of Reality use the same engine as High Moon, they literally used the same character models and level meshes from the previous installments. Remember Dark of the Moon stealth mode and all the various problems the title bared? They're all back with a new coat of paint, and all the glitches that hindered the console version of Fall of Cybertron were present and accounted for. For no discernible reason, Transformers Rise of the Darkspark sought to unite the completely divergent fictions of High Moon's Cybertron universe with Michael Bay's Transformers cinematic reality, completely ignoring the fact that the Cybertron games were repeatedly insinuated to be a potential origin story for the original animated series. The game begins in continuity with the film, wherein a mysterious purple meteor crashes into the Earth. The Autobots reach the crash site and Optimus sees an ancient Cybertronian relic called the Darkspark, the antithesis of the Matrix of Leadership. Whereas the Matrix grants wisdom, the Darkspark gives the user the power to bend the universe and its inhabitants to their own will. The Autobots would clear out the mercenaries defending the Darkspark, but fail to stop the bounty hunter Lockdown from escaping with the relic. The perspective changes to Cybertron, where Megatron and Optimus give explanations to their faction's current state. Now, to the average onlookers who've never played the earlier Cybertron games, this story would seem like a solid foundation, but to avid fans who've actually been there since Fall of Cybertron's supposed finish, it looked like a cash grab dumpster fire. Just exactly when did Megatron find this newly introduced Darkspark, and how did he fight Optimus Prime in his new body when the first time he put his upgrades to the test was at the climax of Fall of Cybertron when the two had their last fight? To make a long rant short, the classic Cybertron portion of the game included the most aggressive repurposing of existing assets I've ever seen in a title. Character models were lifted directly from High Moon's game. Incidental dialogue was lifted directly from High Moon's game.
No more warmongering for you! No more warmongering for you!
Each level felt pieced together from bits of the Cybertron games with the thinnest, most vague explanations given, if they were given at all. It was obvious that Transformers Rise of the Darkspark fumbled the elements of other better games that it lifted wholesale, but it handled what little additions it made with even less grace. The quote-unquote movie reality levels were budget game material, all flat surface and stock buildings, and the few new Transformer designs to feature in Transformers Rise of the Darkspark were an embarrassment, a bare-bones imitation at the complexity and sophistication of the Cybertron games' robots. Due to the nature of the game's narrative, several characters had multiple models to choose from, each related to a given continuity. For example, Autobots Bumblebee and Grimlock featured two separate playable character models, one from the War for Cybertron continuity, and one from the cinematic universe. Optimus Prime also featured two separate character models from these continuities, plus a Transformers Generation 1 model. The story inelegantly moved from section to section and the game's dialogue was awful, and its attempt to ape previous games' alternating view of the Autobot-Decepticon conflict only resulted in a story that felt pointless. Another gripe critics had was how repetitive audio tracks would play over and over during the movieverse segments. Chants like "Let's see what you got" and "Another one" only added to the player's frustration. The console and PC versions of Rise of the Darkspark was a third-person shooter, much like its predecessors from High Moon Studios. Although it featured assets from Dark of the Moon, Edge of Reality went with a bare-bone version of Fall of Cybertron's weapon system. The weapons felt ineffective and flimsy. Swapping forms became pointless in all but a few situations. And that one power trip moment you get as Age of Extinction Grimlock felt more like a dragged-out chore to dismantle endless hordes of Decepticons. Returning to the features category was Escalation Mode, a cooperative multiplayer mode in which you and up to 3 players fight off waves of invading enemies. But one wave felt very much like the other. There wasn't enough variety to keep it interesting for long. The game tried to keep you hooked by doling out a constant stream of rewards for your progress in the form of weapon upgrades, but the action was too shallow to make any of these rewards meaningful. The console and Windows version of Transformers Rise of the Darkspark received negative reviews from critics. Approval ratings for these versions averaged from 30% and 59% at game rankings, while Metacritic reports in scores in the 40s. IGN gave it a bad rating of a 4.0 out of 10.0. The game was panned by critics abroad the boards. Rise of the Darkspark would be the last chapter in the War for Cybertron trilogy. As mentioned earlier, the Transformers brand is only as good as its parent company allows it to be. We witnessed Hasbro take a leap of faith by entrusting their brand to a studio who didn't have a strong catalog, but their endeavors ultimately paid off. The War for Cybertron Games ushered in a new dawn for the franchise moving forward, but sadly it was abused by its grimy handlers, which was Activision, a company known for its absurdly egregious acts of video game capitalism. After looking at huge sales numbers from the Cybertron franchise and the loyal fan base, they treated us like walking ATMs, and we deserve better treatment than that. When it comes to the Transformers and other franchises in general, we're just a number to Activision. They stopped caring about us as individual entities striving for a good product. I know I was simply just one in a sea of millions of copies sold to make them money. It probably didn't matter how much I helped by investing in the franchise. As of October 2015, Transformers Devastation would be the last TF game published under the Activision umbrella. In August 2016, they would re-release a remastered version of Fall of Cybertron on the PS4 and Xbox One, and the marketing campaign was piss poor. They'd go on to release a launch trailer that was basically a reused trailer for the original version. Since then, the Transformers IP has been scattered about to other mainstream platforms such as mobile devices via Androids and iOS. Some of the bigger ventures will be developed by foreign countries which ostracize its Western audience. Fans have their fingers crossed that the Transformers will return to consoles along with a prominent developer to rekindle the flame that made them epic. Until then, all we can do is sit on our fingers and wait. I hope you guys enjoyed this little history lesson regarding the rise and fall of the War for Cybertron games. It was a time-consuming project, but it was fun replaying some of the titles. I'd absolutely love to hear some of your past experiences with the games in the comment section below. As always, I ask that you like or dislike the video. It doesn't have to be a thumbs up, it can be a thumbs down. Any feedback is good feedback and will only help me improve on future content. And also consider becoming a patron. It helps this channel stay independent and self-sustained. But anyways, this was your boy RBG signing out on another video. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.